So my name is Al Simon. I'm the crew chief of the ER-2 aircraft over here. And so as a crew chief, basically I'm overall in charge of the plane. That pretty much means that I go in and make sure that any maintenance that we have coming up is figured out and scheduled. I work with the project managers to make sure that everything goes the way it's supposed to, make sure we get our parts ordered, make sure the aircraft is ready for flight every single day, and make sure that I let out my guys know what they need to do. So I have about 4 or 5 mechanics depending on the day that work directly for me, and then we also have some avionics technicians that do all the avionics stuff on the plane. So for us on the maintenance side, we're pretty much in charge of anything on the plane that isn't connected to wires for the most part. So we do the engine, we have an engine shop, but we do a little bit of engine work. We do all the work on the plane as far as the panels, remove panels. We service the plane. We also don't do the ejection seat, but apart from that, we'll pretty much do everything else. But that's pretty much my job, and it's exciting. And then out here, one of the other things we do out here is we have pods on the forward and aft, which we have instruments in. So you have one there, which is your aft body. We also have the nose, which is open right there, which we have instruments inside of. The panel that's up top, we have some instruments in there. That's the upper cube bay, and then there's a panel on the bottom. There's also an instrument in there. On most days, we will remove all the forebody, aft body, nose, and then the panel, so the instrument teams can remove their instruments. We'll work directly with them depending on if they want it out or not. Some instruments are a little bit more time consuming, so they take a little bit more time. Other ones are really easy. They just get removed and they go off and do everything on their own. But we're pretty much going to be putting them in, removing them and everything like that, which is pretty cool. And then you know, the other thing that we'll do is we'll do engine runs and stuff like that, which I'm qualified as an engine run mechanic, and one of the other guys over there, he's also licensed as being able to do that. So we can do idle runs and everything. Usually if we have to do a high power, we'll have the pilots come out and do that. Just makes it a little bit easier, and usually they're more up to terms with the emergency procedures that are going to be going on, so it makes it a little bit easier for them to do it. Yeah. And then the other thing I also do is work on the flight schedule. So I'll see what the flights are coming up. So if we usually have a flight with all the, it takes about 4 hours from the moment we get into work to when we can actually do a launch. So the first 2 hours is installing the instruments, letting them do their pre-flights and stuff like that. After that, we'll take the aircraft out and we'll fuel the aircraft outside, which will be right over there. And then we'll take the aircraft out, we'll get it all prepped up and ready to go. To start the aircraft, we have to have electrical power, which is a power cart. So we'll have that over here. And this aircraft doesn't have an APU, which is an auxiliary power unit, which a lot of other planes have, like a 747, F-18 Super Hornets. So we use what's called a huffer. What that does is it creates an airflow, and that goes directly to the engine to spool it up, and then they'll induce fuel at a certain point, which will basically start the engine, and then we'll disconnect the air when they're ready for it. And that's pretty much how we start the aircraft. Yeah, it's really cool. It's also very loud.
When they're not flying, I mean, I'm guessing you're the actual busiest when they're not flying.
It usually depends. So like if we end up taking off and we come back and there's no issues at all, it's actually really easy. We basically would just be here for like instrument teams if they need anything. If we do have a maintenance issue that comes up, it just kind of depends how long it's going to take. Like if it's a generator that we have to replace, that could be like an entire day. If it's just servicing, that's just, you know, not very long at all. And then if we have to do troubleshooting, that really just depends on what it is. And a lot of the stuff we've had this year has mostly been on the avionics side where we've had the issues, and they've been pretty easy fixes, so we've been really, really lucky so far, knock on wood. But yeah, it just kind of depends on what's happening, but for the most part, on a normal day-to-day, it's not really that bad. The longest, we'll have like a 14-hour day, so we'll have like an 8-hour flight, and then when we come back, it's about 2 hours after recovery, and that will be basically downloading all the instruments and everything like that. But as soon as we downloaded it and everyone's good, then we pretty much are out of here for the day. And then we'll usually have a day or two in between, which is like today. And like today, we just basically take it out. So we have locks on this plane, which is liquid oxygen. That's what they use. The other system that aircrafts use is called OBOGS, which is onboard oxygen generating system. That is basically a concentrator, and it takes air in from the ECS, or the environmental control system, and then it will convert it into oxygen. I think I worked on that system in the Navy, and I think that they had a lot of issues with it. So the locks is a little bit easier, but it is a little bit more labor intensive. And by that, I mean it leaks out, and they obviously use it, so we do have to service it. With the F-15s, the F-18s, we just removed the LOX bottle directly from it. This plane, if we removed it, it would take about 10 hours. It's very stuffed up in there. Yeah, so we have some servicing ports on the other side, and we'll just take the plane directly outside, hook up the locks, and we'll locks up, and we have 2 bottles on the plane, which we actually did this morning.
So the liquid oxygen, what's that used for?
That's for breathing.
That is what.
Yeah, that's what they use for breathing. So yeah, and then
how does it become a gas that they're breathing then?
So basically, as it comes out of it, it goes through, you know, the tubes or whatever. But as it comes out of the LOX bottle, it basically will turn itself into the gas as soon as it comes out. So it has like it's basically a bottle, and then it has these little valves and stuff on it. And as it comes out of the converter, it will basically convert into the gaseous form, and then it will make its way up to their suits, so they can use it. Yeah.
And it's directly connected to the suits.
Well, for our pilots, yeah, it's directly hooked up to their suit, and then it will be, because they have the helmet and the full basically astronaut suit.
Yeah.
On an F-18 or an F-15, it directly goes into their mask that they'll just wear, and those are direct flow, so it's always basically just coming out. Yeah. So.
What type of fuel does it use? Is there something special on this type of plane?
Yeah, so we use JPTS. It's basically a mixture that Lockheed came out with and built, and it's basically just designed for this plane. It has some additives inside of it that prevent the water within the fuel from freezing and causing issues. Obviously, we go to 70,000 feet, so it gets very cold up there. So yeah, we use JPTS, and wherever we go, nowhere ever has it, because the only plane that really uses it is us and the SR-71, which obviously doesn't fly anymore. So we have 3 tanks outside right now, which I think you guys have seen, and those all have about, I think it's like 5,000 gallons or 7,000 gallons in it, and we'll just go out there, and we have our own pumpers, but we have to, everywhere we go, we have to bring our own fuel. Nowhere ever has our fuel for us. Yeah.
So how many gallons does it take for like an 8-hour flight?
So for an 8-hour flight, it's about 2,488 gallons. And the difference between the way that we fuel this plane and where other planes fuel is like on a 747, for instance. You go on the wing, you open it up, and then you'll connect the lines on each side, the fuel lines, and then you'll basically just go in, and they have switches where you can pick where the fuel is going to each tank. We don't have that ability. We actually have to open each individual tank. So our outboard tanks hold 244 gallons, and then we have 2 of those, so we would fill those first. We have a sump tank that's directly in the middle that feeds the engine directly. That holds 100 gallons. And then we have the 2 inboard tanks. I'm not really sure what the max on it is, but I think it's like 1,200 gallons, I think. And then, so for a flight we do, like our last flight we did 244 gallons on each outboard, and then I believe we did 950 gallons on the inboard, and then 100, and it was 22,488 gallons. That's about average for an 8-hour flight. And then if they have to go more, like I think the highest they've gone is like 2788, I believe, but that was for a flight. I believe they were flying to Africa like 5 or 6 years ago, and they flew directly from Brazil to there, so they topped it off a lot, so, you know, flying over the ocean. And then usually, like when we do like a proficiency flight, which is just to keep our pilots proficient in flying, which they have to do, I think, like 4 flights every 4 months, I think, and then test a bunch of stuff. We'll usually just fuel it to like 588 gallons, and that's about what they'll do, which is basically only the outboards and then the sump tank, and that will be our 588. But the other important thing about it is, because the wings are so long, obviously if you have weights that are directly at the ends, it's very hard to, you know, stay in the air and control it. So the way it works is the inboard tanks will go first, and our sump tank is designed where it has these floats, and I think it's 75 gallons. It will do the inboards, and then as soon as the inboards are empty, it will drop down to, I believe, 50 gallons. And then once it does that, it does the outboards. They have 35 gallons of unusable fuel, which they'll never get down to. But usually they come back with about 450, 500 gallons. But it's basically to tell them, hey, you need to get down like immediately because you're about to run out of fuel. But they never get to that point. We fuel them with plenty of fuel. A lot of the times they'll end up dumping a little bit of fuel if they have to.
How many people does it take on your team to while during the data collection period while they're doing it? Like
you mean like here right now?
Here right now.
Okay, so right now we have myself, and then we have 3 other mechanics. So there's 4 mechanics in total, and then we have 2 avionics techs. Usually when we go on like other missions, we only usually take 2 mechanics. But we have like I think 12 instruments on this, which is a lot. So it's a lot easier. And with them wanting to fly 8-hour missions, we decided that, hey, we'll take an extra guy. We can do it with 3. It's just a little bit harder harder. So we like to keep it that way, and then it makes it so that no one's jumping around, everyone can pay attention, because obviously when you're flying a plane like this, obviously safety is the biggest thing. So you want to have the people you have and the people you need, and at least the people you have to know what they're doing. So training is a massive thing we also do. But
how about, is there training to get to this point where we're here able to collect the data? Is there a specific training you're doing, or is it just kind of ongoing?
Well, pretty much like all our missions and stuff, for us anyway, it's all the same thing. We really, as far as the instruments are concerned, because doesn't matter what the instrument is, they all pretty much go in the pods the same. We have different things, like the pod that's over here, we have a couple different additions to it just for the instrument itself. But attaching the pod, which is the main thing we do, and installing it is mostly the same. So a lot of the guys we have prior U-2 experience from the military, and the ones that didn't, we usually, when they get over here, we'll just train them, hey, this is what we do here, this is what we do here. But as long as we really have like 1 or 2 guys that really know what's going on with the mission, and then some other guys that don't, as long as they know how to connect the pods and stuff, we can kind of make by with it, so it's not a massive issue. But
I have one last question, and that's, so if we get to a point where we have maybe a classroom of kids watching this, what advice do you have for someone that's like, I want to work on airplanes? What's one of the best things, or a couple of the best things they can do to prepare for that kind of career?
So the funny thing, so I guess I'll tell a little story about it. So when I got out of high school, I had no mechanical background at all. Never really thought about doing it, and decided, hey, I'm going to join the Navy. I got in the Navy, and I realized working on planes is so much fun. You get to work on all this different stuff, you get to see this plane flying, and it's so much engineering and stuff that goes into it. And then pretty much if anyone really wants to get into it, is just go online and start learning about it, watching videos, get interested in going to see air shows and stuff like that, researching the older planes. There's a lot of museums all over the world that you can go and see just to catch up and see older planes. If anyone's from Florida, where I was for a while, they have a place called Fantasy of Flight, and the guy that runs that is Kirby Weeks, I believe his name is, and he has all these planes, and his biggest thing is they all have to fly. And some of these planes are like, they look like they're from like 1920s, and it's so amazing to see. But most of the mechanics we have also have something called an A&P license, which is an airframe or power plant license. So if they do want to do it, there's actually a lot of schools now that are opened up to anyone. You can go there, you can get your training in, they'll get your certifications, you can get your, you take your tests, your orals and practicals, which is what you need. Once you get the certification, everyone always says it's a license to learn. So you get the certification and you go to a plane, you learn what to do. And there's plenty of opportunities everywhere. You can go and find, working on small little Cessnas and stuff like that on airfields. You can work on 747s, 737s, any of those planes. And if you want to go in the military, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, they're all great opportunities to get your foot in the door. And they will definitely train you in everything you need to do to get to where you need to. But I love working in aviation. They always say, find a job that you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life, and I think that's what I did, because I really don't feel like I'm ever working. I just come to work and enjoy what I'm doing, and it's like a hobby that they pay me for.